All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. It's the free-for-all. Hope you'll join me. Haven't got too many calls. Seems like the videos are getting a lot of play. A lot of people are hitting them, clicking on them, so I'm real happy about that. Still nowhere near where we should be, but we'll get there, I promise you. Let me turn that off. There's a little bit. Maybe that's why people are like, why should we listen if we're going to have to hear that nonsense? The back and forth. Why did that? I don't know. Who knows? Let me mute that anyway, so that doesn't happen again. If I can even find, there we go. Mute that site. All right, let's get to Gaza. This is a free for all, so we're going to talk about the stories. I'm going to talk about the stories that I addressed this week, and I think they're all incredibly important. Very, very sad, of course. As I mentioned yesterday, but I do want to talk to you. So call me, 240-363-7190, 240-363-7190. And here is Nora O'Donnell. This is last night in Gaza. By the way, I will be responding to various comments that I've received on social media for my programs this week. Here we go. Nora O'Donnell, Tel Aviv.
The border to Gaza, where innocent civilians who have nothing to do with terrorism are trapped with no way out. CBS's Imtiaz Tayeb reports tonight on some of the youngest casualties of war there. And a warning, some of the images are disturbing.
Across Gaza, and its children who are paying the ultimate price. The lifeless body of a baby girl is placed next to her dead father in the middle of the street. At the main Shifa hospital, tiny bodies covered in blood are treated by exhausted doctors. There are so many casualties, intensive care units are overflowing, and there's just 3 days of fuel left. Other hospitals are already out, says Dr. Mohammed Matar.
I think the whole medical sector and the health department maybe will collapse maybe in 2 or 3 days.
Over half the population of Gaza.
Let me clarify. He said the whole system is going to collapse in maybe 2 or 3 days, and maybe as soon as today, as I get to the second story from Gaza in a moment. But let's watch a little more from this really, really horrifying clip. These are the specific results, the fruits of the Israeli retaliatory ongoing strikes, the bombing of Gaza that continues relentlessly, remorselessly, raining death on the people of Gaza.
Gaza is under the age of 18, just children who had no say in Hamas's brutal assault on southern Israel. At least 300,000 people are displaced, many sheltering in schools. 15-year-old Mohammed Halas is now homeless. We're sleeping in a hospital with non-stop bombing above us, he says. I hope that the world looks at us with some mercy. This is Gaza tonight, almost complete darkness. Despite some international criticism, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has also ordered a complete blockade of Gaza, meaning Israel won't allow in food, fuel, or water until Israeli abductees are returned home. But Hamas says it refuses to negotiate their release until Israel lifts its siege, only amplifying the misery of the more than 2 million people who live here, including around 600 Americans. Israel has repeatedly targeted Gaza's Rafah border crossing with Egypt as the Egyptian government negotiates with the U.S. and Israel to let in fuel and humanitarian aid.
But Egypt is refusing to allow an exodus of Palestinians into its countries over fears Israel will try to prevent them from ever returning to the Gaza Strip, which means for those trapped there, there's nowhere to run. Nora.
All right, so that's the story there from CBS News last night. Outstanding work, really. I mean, they brought us right into that war zone. There's no sugarcoating it. They didn't. I guess they mentioned that these ongoing bombing missions against Gaza, basically they're just shooting ducks in the water. The Gazans are herded into a tiny area. It's an incredibly densely populated region, and they're just being bombed remorselessly. I know that, and without any reason that I can come up with, any possible justification. This is an absolute horror. You know, it's murderous. It is. I think it's fair to say, is it genocidal? Is it fair? I mean, you know, the victims have become the victimizers, and it's horrifying. It's awful. I just wanted to set the stage. We talked about this yesterday, killing children. Here is the second story from just this morning. Here's the AP. So Palestinians began a mass exodus from northern Gaza today. They began it today after Israel's military told some 1 million people to evacuate towards the southern part of the besieged territory. Basically, this is an area about the size of Miami Beach. I mean, it's very, very small. It's a narrow strip. I guess it's a little bit wider, but it's not even as long. I think 7 miles, something like that. So basically, you're walking 2-3 miles through rubble, but you're going to be in the same war zone, right? I mean, it's not like they're getting to go to some safe place. Southern Gaza is being targeted as well. The whole area is besieged. They can't leave. You ask me, well, how do you know, Hal, that southern Gaza is getting bombed just like northern Gaza? And really, it's more like east-west because it's right that strip along the Mediterranean. But how do I know? Why do I say that? Because at the Rafah crossing, which is between Gaza and Egypt, so that's the southern side, the side away from Israel, they told you in that report, there's bombing. And any kind of humanitarian aid is being stopped unless or until Hamas says, or Hamas does release its hostages. But of course, Hamas says, we're not going to even negotiate with you until you stop killing Gazans. So it is an ugly standoff. But again, I don't see any proportionality. I don't see any moral equivalency here. The Gazans have no freedom of movement. They are being attacked for what a small number of Hamas terrorists did, and innocent children are being killed by the Israeli army. I don't see how this is proportional in any way, how this is appropriate. It's a war crime. No question about it. So the UN has said, okay, so you're telling them they all have to flee Israel because you're going to invade this rubble that you've created. But if you do that, it will be calamitous. Not that it's not already calamitous in Gaza. You're just going to make it even worse. You're just going to add to the Holocaust you've already created, the mass death, the killing field that is now Gaza. And they said that, I don't trust Hamas, obviously, said don't evacuate. It's a ploy, stay in your homes. I mean, you're clearly caught if you're in Gaza. You have no freedom of movement whatsoever. The only freedom of movement now is you can move within Gaza to another area where you're also likely to be targeted and killed, and your children and your parents are likely, if your parents made it this far, to also be killed. It's horrific. So, again, there's only so much we can say. There's only so much we can point out about these actions by Israel. I do want to get to your comments. I had several responses to what I discussed when I brought this topic up yesterday. So here, this is from M, and I'm going to pursue my normal procedure, which is I don't identify by name people who comment on social media, even though they often do it themselves. But I just feel like, hey, if you can put something on my social media feed, even in Halitics, whatever, on YouTube, but unless you come on my show, and I want you to, by the way, 240-363-7191, 240-363-7191. M, come on my program. But what M wrote is, I'm not so sure that Hamas actually represents the Palestinian people. So that's a legitimate comment. I want to get into why that's important and why that only makes Israel's actions even that much more horrific, that much more awful. And also, by the way, really kind of justifies, if you're looking to, what Hamas did. Again, 240-363-7191. No, 90. There's 7190, right? 240-363-7190. Go by the number that's on your screen, not that if I gave you it erroneously. Also, click like, please, and click subscribe. The subscription numbers are inching up again. We had a little bit of an intermittent period where they weren't going up very much. They're starting to inch up again, but let's see those grow. I have said I'd love 1,000. That was kind of a goal by the end of this year. Probably won't get there, but you never know. You never know. So again, please click subscribe if you haven't. And hey, subscribe your friends, your family, anybody you know. Try to get them on board as well, Halitics. Because I'm doing something a little different, a little unique. There's really no one who shares, really presents the views that I do here, and also gives you the opportunity to sound off at any point. So I do hope, again, that you'll join me. So again, does Hamas represent the Palestinian people? So I decided to do a little bit of research. I could have said, well, they're not really a democratically elected group, but I felt like it was better that I try to give you kind of a more professional answer. So this is the answer I got from Council on Foreign Affairs, Council on Foreign Relations, I should say, CFR. What is Hamas? It is a spin-off of the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood that began in the 1980s, late 80s. The Islamist group Hamas took over the Gaza Strip after defeating its rival political party Fatah in elections in 2006. So in 2006, they did win elections. Fatah, considered the more moderate group, the group that was more willing to negotiate with Israel. And negotiations with Israel by Fatah had not really redounded to the benefit of the Palestinian people. That's why they elected Hamas. The sense in Gaza at that time in the early 2000s was that negotiations had not resulted in a real improvement in life for Palestinians in Gaza. It just hadn't. They were still limited to Gaza. They still had only limited political autonomy and self-determination. Israel still was keeping an eye on everything going on in Gaza. So because that policy that Fatah had of negotiating, of moderation, had not led to a significant improvement in quality of life for Palestinians, they turned to the much more militant, much more aggressive group, Hamas. And since 2006, 17 years ago, there have been no elections. I looked into that. I wanted to see, well, has Hamas been reelected? Because, the question or the point by M was they're not even sure that Hamas represents the Palestinians. So if they don't represent the Palestinians, and frankly, they're not a democratically elected group. They're a militant group that won an election 17 years ago and has been reprising against Israel for the Israeli occupation of Gaza. But given that it's been 17 years since there was an election, and given even more important, perhaps arguably more importantly, half of Gaza is children. Those children had Zippo, nothing remotely could you attribute to them Hamas's power, Hamas's military, whatever military power they have, to launch this attack into Israel. No, half the population didn't exist in the last election. And yet Israel is taking reprisal, is killing thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, of Gazans, because of what a non-democratically elected group chose to do in Israel with, let's be honest, a lot of provocation by Israel. It's utterly immoral. And if you're going to say, well, Israel gets to go into, we're not going to tell Israel what to do in terms of their self-defense, because that's what some politicians, that's what Jake Auchincloth said. That's what Adam Schiff said. Hey, Israel gets to defend herself. She was attacked by Hamas, so she wants to go turn all of Gaza into rubble and kill hundreds of thousands of people and force 1 million people to leave their homes and won't let them even flee to Egypt, or is working with Egypt to prevent them from fleeing to Egypt, and will bomb any supplies into Gaza, all because of what what the political party in charge, Hamas, did without any referendum, without any indication that this is what the Palestinians in Gaza want. But we're justified in doing what we're doing to the innocents of Gaza. Then how can you possibly complain about what Hamas did to Israel? After all, the Jewish people that they killed in Israel actually do sort of have a representative government. They did vote in recent elections. There have been a number of elections in which Bibi, either his party, is it Likud, won, or they were able to form some kind of coalition government. The IDF is actually a military, is one of the most advanced armies in the world. It's a people's army. It's a citizens' army. It's every Israeli except for the Hasids serves in the military there. So what Israel has done to the Palestinians in the West Bank, what Israel, in terms of taking away their land, putting more and more settlements there, breaking up their towns and cities, and what they've been doing in Gaza for over 20 years, 30 years, whatever it is, herding them together, concentrating them in smaller and smaller areas. That's actually with the apparent approval of the Israeli people, the Israeli citizenry. So how can they be claiming, and I'm not saying they're not innocent, but they're less innocent than the victims in Israel of the Hamas attack are far less innocent in the sense that they bear real political responsibility for their government compared to the victims, the children of Gaza, who had zero say, and neither did their parents in 17 years, over who was going to be in charge of their country, of their government. So it's just more evidence, if you needed any, of really the barbarity of the Israeli government right now. And the complete immorality, the complete lack of any moral equivalence. All right, here's from, I'm not sure if M was being critical of me or just presenting a really good fact. And so I'm not going to assume there was any disagreement with what I was saying. But the fact is that, yes, Israel is a democracy to a degree. Certainly it's not democratic for the Palestinians. It's not democratic for Arabs, who have limited, if any, power whatsoever. But yes, the government represents the citizens there, and it's acted with absolute cruelty, savagery, inexcusably. All right, so here's from another comment. Are you intentionally following the JSP Day of Resistance Toolkit? I think JSP means the Students for Justice in Palestine. And then, so I think that's what JSP, Students for Justice in Palestine, Resistance Toolkit. You rally against coordinated media and misinformation while at the same time following just such a script. So I was trying to think, well, how have I misinformed, right? I was like, and I asked for that. And the response was, which I'm not going to show, but the response was, well, look at the Students for Justice in Palestine toolkit, and you'll see that you're misrepresenting their position. So I was thinking about that, and I yesterday I played the video of the student leader at the rally, the DSA rally in New York City at Times Square. And she was very, very clear. She supports what Hamas did. She supports the terrorist attack on the Israeli citizens. And I said that. That's true. She does. I took issue when Brianna Joy Gray said, oh no, they're so they support peace. They're not cheering the deaths of Israeli citizens. Well, that's false. They were. She clearly was. And there was a lot of cheers. I'm not going to condemn them for that. Israel calls it a war. I mean, in a war, if you kill the enemy, a lot of times you're happy about it, right? So I'm not going to condemn the Students for Justice in Palestine for taking the side of Hamas. But I don't think I misrepresented. There was no misinformation. I didn't sugarcoat what they're doing. I didn't pretend, oh no, they just want to kumbaya, which seemed to be what Brianna Joy was saying. So again, I'm unclear. Now you may disagree with me. You may think it's what was the word that Auchincloss used? Depraved. You may think my position is depraved. Okay. But I don't think it's misrepresenting the Students for Justice in Palestine. 240-363-7190. So I do want to give the Students for Justice in Palestine, though, their moment. If I'm going to be criticized for not, giving you their toolkit, I do want you to hear what they have to say, at least one group. Now, they're, of course, all over the country in lots of different colleges, universities. Harvard got a lot of play because Auchincloss, the representative from Massachusetts in Congress, was very, very critical of the Students for Justice in Palestine from Harvard and critical of the Harvard administration for seeming to recognize that it wasn't just a simple case of Israelis being murdered, but that you had to look at this attack context. And of course, Auchincloss doesn't want to do that. By the way, got a comment from somebody who also said something similar, that I don't care what motivation is, there's some crimes that are just beyond understanding, beyond excuse, something of that nature. By the way, I'm hoping that person will be on my program. They said they would be, maybe in a couple of weeks. So we'll get into that more. But again, trying to separate the divorce from the context what Hamas did, and you can't divorce it from the context. Now you can say it was not an appropriate response, what they did. I mean, that's fine. We can argue that. I don't think it was appropriate either, but I understand why it happened. I understand why they went into Israel and started killing Israelis. I get it. And remember, far, even after that attack, a small fraction of the number of Israelis have been killed since 2000, 2001 versus the number of Palestinians that dwarfs that number. So I get what happened, and I don't think you can divorce it from context. Here's Students for Justice in Palestine protesting in at the Ohio State University. And again, this is in response to the claim that I'm not, fully aware of, fully conversant with what SJP wants. So let's hear what they say they want.
Meanwhile, here in the United States, some remain divided on which side they support. And now college students are getting involved. A group of Ohio State students and other community members rallied at the State House today, showing their support for Gaza and Palestine. 10 TV's Carly Dion was there and joins us now live in studio with the details. Carly?
Doug, about 100 people gathered at the State House today for a rally in support of their fellow Palestinians in Gaza. And student organizers tell me today's goal is to spread awareness for a side they feel is not being heard.
Gaza, Gaza, don't you cry! Palestine will never die! Palestine will never die!
This is a response to the 75 years of a brutal occupation and apartheid system that was put under them.
Ohio State Students for Justice in Palestine co-president Hibba Latif says the purpose of this rally is to march against the occupation of Gaza by Israeli forces and to stand with Palestinians. Latif calls the Hamas attack a resistance movement against the occupation.
The Israeli forces have violated international human rights laws over the course of 75 years, with the Gaza Strip being
all right, so that's part of it, but she ended it right there, being the worst example. I mean, they're peaceful protests. Why is that a problem? Does anyone have a problem with that? Does anyone have a problem with what she said? It seems to me they're spot on. They're responding the way we want students to respond. I can't, you know, to me, nothing in that video in any way justifies what Israel did. And nothing in that video suggests that these are violent people who are calling on some sort of, you know, uprising or jihad against all Jews or against all Israelis. Now, I will say that's something Hamas has been trying to do, is rally the Muslim world against Israel. And I get it. I mean, wouldn't you? I mean, you look for your allies where you can find them. So I don't know where to go with that. I would say this to Israel: you're creating an Armageddon. And if you want to survive as a country, you have to stop right now. You can't. You've lost your soul. What kind of a country are you? Is this what you want it to be? Just a murderous, militarist state, a Sparta? Is that what you want for Israel? Was that the dream? To kill poor, weak people that you concentrated into a tiny area? Was that your goal? Because that's what you're doing. It's a nightmare. The dream of Israel is now a nightmare. All right, 240-363-7190. It is the free-for-all. Click like, click subscribe. It is Halitics. I do want to talk to you. I am getting to my various topics over the week. So I wanted to, and we talked on Wednesday with two great environmental organizers, leaders, Maury and Elaine. Thank you again both for being on the program. You're always welcome, Maury Johnson and Elaine Tanner from Appalachia. Let's enter another environmental group. These are our good friends at Climate Defiance, and they have really done extraordinary work taking on the duopoly, taking on the fossil fuel government, the petro state that we live in today. And I was very, very impressed. Now, I was invited, just so folks know, I was invited to take part in this action. I did not do so. This was in Baltimore. I believe it was Tuesday, maybe it was Wednesday, I'm not sure. I did not, I declined. I'm not really and maybe I'm older, but I never really relished the idea of getting arrested and direct confrontation, but I see the value. I'm not critical of this. I admire them for what they're doing, 100%. Now, I think they chose a great target, Pete Buttigieg. I was skeptical of, and I remain critical of, the decision to shut down the one road into Burning Man back in, I guess it was September. I didn't think that was a good idea. I think they were creating enemies of potential allies. Pete Buttigieg ain't no ally. Pete Buttigieg is the enemy. The Commerce Secretary, who started with McKinsey, a Harvard grad, served in the military, and there are many, many honorable people in the military, maybe very few people who are honorable who serve in McKinsey. Consultancy. So this is a guy who's part of the Mike, who's part of the fossil fuel industry, apologists, and shills. And that's why he has the job he does in the Biden administration. So, You can see this. This is from their from a posting. I'm not sure if this is on their website, but they're going to make Pete's life an effing hell. And you know what? Again, there are those who say, oh, this isn't right. This isn't fair. He's just doing his job. Are you kidding me? His job is to destroy, make our lives, to make our planet a hellscape. And he's doing a real good job of it. All right, I want to give a little time to the video that they did where they shut down Pete's event. And it's really, really powerful. So let's see if we can get to it. And let's see, here we go. So, no, I'm in the wrong place as per usual. I got it. We'll be there in just a sec. I've had a little bit of issues with the tech, and I actually am pleased. I'll be honest with you. Maybe you'll be surprised, but things have gotten much. I think the audio quality is much better. Anyway, here's Petro Pete. Let's see. We got it. Here we go. So here's the video, and I think it's playing now too. So you'll hear it in just a sec.
Stop and fossil fuels, Pete, and fossil fuels, and fossil fuels. Stop Petro Pete! Stop Petro Pete! Stop Petro Pete!
Your DOT just approved the Seaport Oil Terminal, a project that will have 80 coal plants worth of greenhouse gas emissions and will worsen air quality in areas that already live in cancer clusters. This is about environmental racism, and it's about the climate impacts this project will have. Will you commit to stopping this project?
Secretary, would you care to address this?
Yeah, for sure. So this has to do with a set of...
Describe what the proposal is, where it is, and where it is in the process.
So I don't want to say anything off the cuff, but I respect where you're coming from.
80,000 comments have been submitted. Communities have spoken.
Go Flink, stop Petro Pete! Stop Spot and Go Flink, stop Petro Pete! Stop Spot and Go Flink, stop Petro Pete!
Think about why he said he cannot speak off the cuff on climate. Please, we're ready to. We're happy to have a conversation with Secretary Pete.
All right, so really, impressive work that they were able to get into that event and shut it down. And again, that is, Pete is the enemy, right? He's the enemy of life, of biodiversity. He is the ally of the 6th great extinction. So for Climate Defiance to go in there and shut it down and brave the, being herded off, I'm not sure if they were arrested or not. That's why I didn't want to get arrested. I got to tell you why. I'm older too. I'll make a defense for myself for not going, because really I should be there. And you should be there too if you can. There are, sometimes people say, oh, we're the moral absolutes of our day. Back in, 1940, 39, whatever, would you go to England and join the RAF to fight the Nazis? In 1861, would you fight in the Union Army to liberate the slaves? And my answer is, I think I would. I hope I would. Right? I hope I would. But I don't know. And I'm confronted with the evil, contemporary evil, which is the consumption of fossil fuels in ever greater quantities, which is not just, and I'm not saying just, it's not a genocide against one group of people, the Jews, which the Nazis perpetrated. It's not the wholesale enslavement of millions and millions of people, which is what the South was doing prior to the Civil War. It's actually threatening the very fabric of all life on the planet. So, it seems like a pretty clear moral absolute to fight against the, ongoing consumption, the production of these facilities, the consumption of fossil fuels, the ramping up LNG, export facilities on ports on the Gulf, which are the cancer alleys that were referred to. It seems clear that that's an absolute evil that we have a moral duty to fight. And yet I'm what am I doing? I'm talking to you. So I don't know. I question myself. What I do urge you is, take what power we have to vote against the angels of death, right? Both parties, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. All right, 240-363-7190 if you want to join me on this. 240-363-7190. And again, please click like, please click subscribe. I did see a comment, I don't have it here for you right now, but from one of my viewers who said, well, natural gas, which is a lot of what they were talking about there, the LNG, ramping up LNG, and that's in response, of course, to the Ukraine war. It's a way that our fossil fuel industry is profiting from the killing, the endless carnage in Ukraine, which led to a great reduction in the amount of gas exported from Russia and oil and petroleum. So the response by our fossil fuel industry, with the complete support of the Biden administration, is to ramp up our export capabilities and our production of natural gas, which is incredibly harmful to the environment. And one response from one of my listeners was, well, natural gas is better than petroleum. Natural gas is better than coal. Well, in some ways, it burns cleaner. I'll give you that. But the amount of fresh water that we are using to extract that gas is extraordinary, and we're running out of fresh water. A lot of the fresh water on the planet is melting into the oceans now because of the fossil fuel crisis, the climate crisis, the new Holocaust, and we used up in 10 years a year's supply of water for Texas, in Texas, just to get out more natural gas. So is it really less harmful for the environment, or is it just more part and parcel of our war, of the human war against our mother, where we're killing ourselves? I think you know what my answer is. I think it's kind of clear. Again, join me. I'd love to talk to you. The weekend's coming up soon. I'll be off for a few days. We will have Arlen back on Monday. Would love to have you join me now. Share your thoughts. I am going to, of course, show you how people commented with me on my, in response to my videos and on Facebook. By the way, also a good place to get more back and forth, kind of where we're building a community, is the Halitics group on Facebook. It's totally open. Anyone can join. The only requirement I have is that you treat people with some measure of respect, the kind of respect you want for yourself. And if you don't, at some point we'll kick you out, or at least delete your nasty comments, if that's what they are. But everyone can join. So go to join the Halitics group on Facebook. So this is a comment in response to my program Monday with Chuck Pinocchio on the State-Based Universal Health Care Act, SBUCA, which would set up, at least allow states, would make it explicit, and I think they probably have this right anyway, but would make it explicit and set out the framework for state-based universal systems as opposed to the national system that many are advocating for, which I advocate for both. So here's from a Canadian here. The Canadian single-payer system is a nightmare, just as broken as the American system. Both are functional monopolies. America's a monopoly of the private system, created by restricting who can access Medicare. Canada is a monopoly of the public, created by restricting access to private medical services. When asked about the system, I point to the VA and say, imagine a whole country of 30 million trapped in the VA system. Now, I highlight that for a reason, which we'll get into in a second. There's nothing efficient or fair about the middle class and the poor languish on long waiting lists for surgeries. The wealthy just go to the few private hospitals in the country, leave the country entirely. All right. So I read this, and my first reaction was, is this some kind of a, one of those phony stories you hear about the long waiting list, the long waiting queues in Canada? You always hear complaints when people here, like me, point to Canada and say it's so much better there. But I wanted to do some investigation. I don't just want to assume people are being dishonest or misinforming you. So I looked into this. One thing that really struck me, and that's why I highlighted, was the comment about the VA, because our VA is actually about the best healthcare we have in this country. It is true single payer, although it's not always single government provided. But it is, it's not all nonprofit provided or government provided or government, but it is single payer. So I was like, really? You're going to say that your system is like the VA as a criticism when our VA is actually one of the best, is the most popular system in America. So I just wanted to look into this and just be able to confirm that and provide you all with some details. But I am also going to show a little love to my Canadian friend who took the time and made the effort to comment, which I always appreciate. So in response to the comment that the Canadian system is like the VA system, assuming that's true, then we should rush to embrace the Canadian system, at least compared to what we have now. So survey finds greater patient satisfaction with care from VA versus community. So when veterans go to the VA system, they're much, much happier than when they go to community hospitals, according to federal data, which bolsters previous evidence of comparatively high quality care provided by VHA facilities. So when the Canadian complains about Canada's healthcare system and says it's akin to our VA system, again, my response is bring it on. That sounds awfully good to me compared to what I have right now, compared to what we have right now. And again, here's some more data. In fact, VA hospitals outperform non-VA and on all 10 core patient satisfaction metrics. So clearly it's better. There's no question. If you are in the VA system, you're lucky. And compared to other Americans, you're very, very fortunate. And we should, assuming that Canada provides a comparable care to the VA, we should look at that as a major endorsement of the Canadian system. That said, Canada's not perfect either. And this is where the Canadians' comments really did, resonate with me. And I'm not going to just say, oh, that commenter was, maybe they're in the pay of the big pharma, of Pfizer, or some sort of for-profit American Academy College of Surgeons who make millions, many of them, and seem to like our system for that very reason, because it profits them. So I looked at this report because I was, what is he talking about? I shouldn't say what are they talking about when they complain about the Canadian system? And if you look at this chart, which the Commonwealth Fund put together, you can see exactly why the Canadian would complain. Of the 11 advanced or industrial nations that were surveyed, Canada and the US fall at the bottom of the barrel, 10th and 11th. Now you can see from this chart how much worse it is in the US than Canada. The difference from Canada to the US is much more significant than the distance between Canada and number 9, Switzerland. And would even appear that the distance between Norway, which is rated in 2021 as the highest performing of these countries, it would appear that Canada is closer to Norway than it is even to the United States. So Canada does have it better by a significant margin than the US. It's also much cheaper. The average American per capita spends about $12,500 on healthcare, maybe a little more than that, close to $13,000. The average Canadian spends about $8,500, so it's about 35% cheaper per person. They save a significant amount of money in healthcare. But even Canada is much more expensive than many of the other countries. So the Canadian system is far from ideal. It's just a hell of a lot better than ours. And I'm not clear what the problems are with the Canadian system versus the US. Maybe having the provincial provinces provided isn't as good as if it were being provided. Now, the provinces make the rules. As I understand it, for example, it's not complete universal care. If you need treatment, if you're sick, if you're injured, yes, you go right to the doctor. You don't have to fill out any forms. You don't have to write any checks. Nothing like that. But for example, not all provinces guarantee medication. You may have to pay extra for medication. A lot of Canadians do have private insurance as well. So it's not a complete single payer system, and that may be part of the problem. UK has the National Health Service. As I understand it's pretty much all single payer. That's number 4 on this chart, pretty good. There's a lot more inequality in the UK than there is in the top country there, Norway. Australia has a lot of inequality. Netherlands is probably between those two. So it's interesting that Australia did so well in this particular chart. I know Netherlands has kind of I think Netherlands is more expensive than some, but they do rely to a degree on private insurers. So there are various models that seem to work pretty well and better than the Canada, and much, much better than the United States. But what all the 10 countries have that we don't is that they guarantee everyone care. There are various ways that they get there, but anyone in those countries who needs treatment gets it right away, gets it free at the point of delivery, and that's the difference more than any other with our country. But there's other factors as well. So yes, the Canadian comment was fair, but at the same point, there are real issues with what Canada delivers versus some of the other countries at the top of the chart. And I would just note, I wish Japan was in there, because Japan, as I understand it, has excellent care, and yet they're not in this chart. Okay, I've got a caller. Who do we have on the line?
Hey, good morning, Hal. It's Tim.
Hi, Tim. Good morning. Thank you for checking in. It's great to chat with you.
Hey, is my audio okay? I'm kind of concerned about it.
It's a little scratchy, but you're coming in. I can hear you. I think everyone can understand you. Yep, go ahead.
Okay. Hey, I just had a quick comment about the Canadian who commented on the VA. I think that's hilarious. He thinks that the VA is not any good. I'm actually thinking about making a switch over to the VA for myself. I'm a little sad I can't take the rest of my family with me, but I know healthcare has been getting really poor in our area in Monterey since Montage started taking over everything. And every veteran that I talked to, they stopped going to their Montage doctors and started going back to the VA.
Yeah, no, I had that exact reaction. I think you saw I put a chart up, Tim, that showed that those who get VA care are happier than any other Americans with their coverage. So I did find that to be an ironic criticism, right? To say, well, our system is like the VA and therefore it's not very good, when we here in America would be like, no, we want it, please give us that.
Yeah. So I think that's the only thing I got to say. I just thought that was kind of a ridiculous statement by the person who wrote that.
Tim, thanks so much for joining me this morning. I got to stop doing the time thing because people watch it anytime, but it's great to chat with you. I'm really glad to hear from you. I hope your family's doing well. Thanks, Tim. Okay. All right. We'll let him go. And every time I get a caller on my system, it allows me to block them. And I wouldn't block you. Why would I ever block you? I'm glad you called. Anyone else want to join me? We're coming up on the end. It's just a little less than an hour. So I got one more story, but you can still join me, 240. Maybe I got 3. 2? No, just one more. So we've gone through the Hamas, the retaliatory, completely inexcusable crimes of Israel against Gaza. Just talked about healthcare. I do want to get, to Dr. West. So this was an interesting story. Oh yeah, climate defiance. I wanted to platform them, and I did. I really appreciate the way they took on Pete. And again, I wanted to get to the final story here, though. This is so Dr. West. Now you know he's my guy. I want Dr. West to be our next president. And even though, and I was, hey, I'm gonna what is it? No permanent allies, no permanent friends, whatever it is. I really like Dr. West, but I'm not going to pull punches when I don't agree with things he's done. And I had said that I didn't understand, I understood some of his concerns about the Green Party. They're not well known in certain areas of the country, especially in the South. Their reputation may lead some folks not to contribute to him if they know that he's running as a Green. That to me I'm not real sympathetic to, because I think that the Green Party's platform is on all fours with Dr. West, and he should be trying to build a successful party that will live on even beyond his career in politics. But I got some of the other criticism, and my question really was, because in some places ballot access might be easier for him as an independent, and that to me would justify running as an independent. So my question to Andy Ellis from the Green Party was, well, could he do both, right? Could he have his cake and eat it too? Could he run as an independent in states where he said it would be easier to run as an independent, like, for example, Mississippi, but at the same time take advantage of the Green Party's ballot access in states where it has a strong presence and can really help him out? So that was my question. I guess what I'm asking is, you can see at the bottom there, let's say the Green Party's on the ballot in California and Maryland, but not in Mississippi. Could West be the Green Party nominee and on the ballot in California and Maryland as a Green, but at the same time be on the ballot in Mississippi as an independent? Because to me, that would make all the sense in the world. And the response was, by the way, is MS? I think MS is the symbol for Mississippi. MI would be, MN is Minnesota, MT is Montana, MO is Missouri, MI would be Michigan. So yes, MS is Mississippi. So my question, does Green have to choose, or could he do both? Does West have to choose Green, or could he do both? Be Green in some places and independent in the others? And this is the response. Yes. Yes, he could. And that was the plan prior to last week. In Ohio, Oklahoma, and a few other places, they were pursuing independent ballot lines, while also pursuing Green Party ballot lines in Maryland and Massachusetts. Green presidential candidates often mix in some independent ballot lines. I think that will be much harder now and will likely split the national party apart if the West campaign tried that. Well, I think one of the things West was maybe concerned about is maybe he wouldn't get the Green Party nomination. But I think that was a pretty unlikely outcome. I think he would have gotten it. I don't think there's any question. He had brought a lot of attention to the Green Party. His policies are exactly what the Green Party stands for. So I'm really disappointed. I'm really saddened that he's not running on the Green Party ticket. I think that was a big mistake. I think that will harm our cause, and it certainly isn't going to help him. That said, you saw the response of Pete Buttigieg to the climate protesters, the defenders of our planet, the defenders of our biodiversity, and it was completely unacceptable. You see the response of the Biden administration to the war that, the death that Israel's raining down on Palestine. It's totally unacceptable. These are not little minimal issues. These are not on the margins. These aren't sort of, well, you know, maybe you like this or maybe you like that. These are existential issues. Endless war, the sixth great extinction, the new Holocaust, and the Biden administration is on the completely wrong side of those issues. It's on the wrong side of healthcare. It's against universal coverage. So I can't vote for him. I'm certainly not going to vote for Trump. The choice is clear. It is Dr. West. There's no one even, you could even consider. Marianne Williamson, she supports the war in Ukraine. RFK Jr. doesn't, he's completely tied to Israel. So for all the problematic nature of Dr. West's campaign, we heard Sabby Sabs talk about that last week, I believe. You know, he's got us between a rock and a hard place. And why would I, if I'm willing to embrace Dr. West, despite my real palpable disappointment with his decision to leave the Greens, then why wouldn't I say, okay, well, I'm not real happy with some of the things Biden does, but, you know, on balance, he's not quite as bad as Trump, so I'll vote for Biden. Well, I think there's a pretty significant difference. Yes, I don't agree with West's strategy. Yes, I think he's turning this race into a vanity project, but in the end, he's on the side of the people. Poor, struggling, working Americans, and around the world, he's on the side of peace. He's on the side of the planet. Nobody else is. So therefore, I have no choice. And I don't believe you do either. I'll be back Monday with Arlen. Thanks so much for watching, listening. Tim, thank you for calling in. Loved hearing from you. I'll be back on Monday.